right, hi everyone. It's my great pleasure to give a bit of update on the seL4 Foundation and what has been happening for the last year, and also a bit of a refresher of what are the aims of the foundation, what are the principles, how do we work, what are we doing. So the seL4 Foundation is the home for the technology as well as the people, so the developers, so basically all of us here. And as seL4 has been seeing a growth in adoption and a growth of the community, there are a number of things that need to happen to support that. I'll go into a bit more detail about all of what that is, but that is what the foundation is looking after so that we can support the community. For that we have, basically the aim is to make sure that seL4 is not only the world's best operating system technology, but that it is readily deployable and supported by the diverse and stable ecosystem of services and products. And ultimately, that means that the community will be supported and vibrant. For this, we have two main bodies at the seL4 Foundation, the Technical Steering Committee and the board. So I'll just explain it very quickly here, but then I'll go in a bit more details about what each body, and that's what the presentation will be, what is the update from the Technical Steering Committee and what's the update from the board. The Technical Steering Committee, as its name says, looks after everything that is technical, mainly looking at supporting the technology and the people, but also looking after contribution that comes from the community. And I'll talk a bit more about that. The board looks after everything that's financial. So part of the community are members, hopefully a lot of people in this room, and hopefully more after this summit and going forward. What the members provide is both the financial support that is needed to provide all of this support back to the community through their membership fees. And then they have also a representative, which then constitute the board, which then can vote on how to use that investment into those different areas, and I'll also mention that. So that's the overview. I'll now go into more details in each part. For the Technical Steering Committee, I'll just start with reminding of what the principles are, and then a bit of news of what has been happening since last summit. So the Technical Steering Committee basically decides on the technical direction. It says the processes and the guidelines. All the meetings are public. They're announced on the mailing list. And this is the Technical Steering Committee chaired by Gerwin. To help the steering committee, they have multiple roles that are described on the doc site. Mainly, you will have reviewers and committers. So the reviewers will be able to help by reviewing and accepting pull requests. And we have one new member in this role, which is Alwyn Joshua from UNSW with expertise in the MCS kernel. And then we have the committers, which in addition to be able to approve pull requests, they're also able to actually merge the pull request. And we have two new people that have been accepted as committers, which is Inden, who's I'm going to talk more about, that has MCS expertise and that is now contracted by the foundation to do more support work. And Ivan, who you've heard about last year, he's here, and you'll hear more about him tomorrow, but he's basically the expert on the microkit. So just to say, expertise is increasing in the community, which is great, and then we are using that expertise to grow the number of people that can help the TSC look after the contributions from the community. There are some established processes for contributions that are again explained in the doc site, which are there to allow contribution to come from the community while having experts that then can safeguard that we keep the design principle and the verifiability of the things that get into the repositories. So you have defined principle to accept contributions. If you have a contribution that touches the verification repository or configurations, either there should be no proof impact or it can't be merged until the proof have been updated. If contributions are significant, we have a process of RFC that you have heard about in previous talks, so the request for comment. This is there really to get early feedback from the design so that then while when the implementation starts, you already have a buy-in from the technical people or the community on the principles that you're using is going to match the principle of seL4 and so on, if later on, for instance, you would like that to be then hosted by the foundation. So in a nutshell, start the engagement early. I think we had the message for quite a while now, especially if you're using seL4 for, let's say, a product that's going to come in and that you will depend on some changes that you might have to have it incorporated into the repositories. So these are the news since the last summit. Goen has been re-elected chair of the Technical Steering Committee until December 2024, which is great. We have 3 special interest groups that have been approved by the TSC. These came from the last year's Bird of a Feather sessions, where some topics were decided to be interesting to constitute SIG. So we have Everton, Matt, and Yan, who have been approved chairs to chair those SIGs. You'll hear more about that on day 3 on Thursday. And even if not a lot of discussion has happened since last year, it's an excellent opportunity to use Thursday to do more of those discussions if you want, like to have this community discussion on these different topics. We have 5 RFCs that have been approved. I won't go into details, but you can see, for instance, that the first one is the seL4 microkits, formerly known as the core platform that we've heard about in the last few talks. And finally, what you'll hear more also about tomorrow, and that someone mentioned previously, maybe Gerwin in one of the answers, we have now official support for Rust on seL4, which is currently on that link, and you'll have Nick talk about that in his talk tomorrow. Finally, the TSC has decided to aim for a new release this year. We haven't had a release for quite some time. The main reason behind that is that it has been quite challenging to maintain the framework for the verification, the binary verification. So we've been working on that. But basically, it's been decided that while we continue to try to reestablish the binary verification and work on the framework, we can no longer hold the releases for that, so we'll work that in parallel, but we'll have a release and be explicit about all of that in our in the website. And finally, just a final reminder from the TSCs that we have those informal hangouts that happens every 2 weeks, and it's a great way to have just chats with experts, and that has been quite useful for a number of people to get answers from the various people in this room along the year. So that's for the technical steering committee part. From the board, I'll talk a bit about how we have invested in the last year, and then a bit about membership. So there are a few areas that we've been investing in, and that gives you maybe an overview of the things that needs to happen to support seL4, the technology, and the community as well. So one of the things is IT and infrastructure, which is critical because this is what allows us to run the whole set of the seL4 tests at each code change and make sure they're in sync with the proofs and so on. So it's critical as seL4 is a high assurance kernel. So we've invested to increase the support hardware boards, facilitate the external contribution. We have a contract to have the ongoing maintenance of that whole infrastructure, as well as paying for AWS to run the tests. The second area of investment is these summits. So as you know, the summits have been organized by the foundation for now. This is the second year. The foundation is actually investing some of its funding to be able to keep the fees, the registration fees, reasonable. We have invested more than we wanted last year, but probably because it was the first one. This year, thanks to all the sponsors that I want to thank again, and probably also a bit more experience from previous years. We're much better in that, but in both cases, we actually just reached 70 people, so we did exactly the same number which last year, which is great. Finally, some specific projects and support. So we had a couple of verification projects that have been invested on by the board, mainly to kickstart things, like we talked about the MCS verification this morning, or the num domain that Gerwin talked about, or some initial work on the automated platform ports that also Gerwin talked about. And then importantly, we invested in these two things also for supporting the community. One is this Rust support, where we contracted Nick to work on that for the foundation. And then we have also another contract with Inden now to provide community support help, like basically being dedicated to look after, you know, the make sure that the PRs are looked after, help with documentation, improving documentation. So a lot of the feedback that we've heard in different talks that we're gonna look after that. Finally, and I'm conflicted here, some of the investment is to pay some of my time, but also with the project coordinator, and we look after, you know, comms and finance and organizing the summits and outreach and so on. So these are the main 4 areas that we invest on. We've also put together a way to for members to pool funding for specific areas. So we have these 3, which I'm gonna mention as big ticket items, which are usually too big for one single organization to pay for. And so we have pre-approved those projects. So if there's a donation going for one of those projects, then it's going to be contracted directly. So we have, as an update, and we haven't really announced it yet because it's quite recent, we had a donation from Excalibyte towards the MCS verification that's going to be contracted to Proofcraft to continue on the MCS verification as well. In terms of members, 23 members. The main new thing since last year, we have the AutoWare Foundation that has joined us, which actually reflects on the increased interest from the automotive sector. And we have a new in quote member, which is Galwa. It's in quote because it's basically Adventium that is now part of Galwa. And we're very grateful that Galwa has just taken over and is now part of the foundation. A reminder that we have specific members that are endorsed service providers if you're interested in services. And finally, final note is how to join if you haven't joined yet. So seL4, yes, we've heard it. It's open source. It's free for everyone to use, but it needs to be supported by the user and adopters. So I try to have the message that if people choose an open source technology, becoming member should be part of that decision. It's part of the package that goes with it, because that's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, because you need all that support and you want the kernel to be supported longer term. So yeah, these are the ways to join. It's really easy. You just Google seL4, find the foundation, join now. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for everyone in this room to continue help us make a better world where the world is more secure and safer, thanks to seL4. Thank you very much.